Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever had to choose between your heart and your responsibilities, or put your dreams on hold for someone you love? If yes, today's story might speak straight to your soul. Join me on a journey from a quiet town in Montana to the glass towers of Boston, where one woman's love for her mother and a man's silent devotion reveal what it truly means to love without conditions. The glass tower of Silver Rock Capitol rose high in the heart of Boston, shimmering beneath the crisp autumn sun. Dressed in a light gray suit, black heels, and a neat ponytail, Emily Carter took a deep breath before stepping through the revolving doors. At 27, Emily wasn't just the youngest hire in the firm's financial analysis division. She was also from the farthest place imaginable, a small town in Montana. She came carrying not just an impressive academic record, but a quiet, burning hope to land a high-paying job and finally help her mother get the heart surgery she needed. Boston felt like a different world, fast-paced, crowded with steel buildings and cutthroat corporate culture. But Emily wasn't here to be overwhelmed. She was here to fight. For her mother. On the top floor of the building, inside a glass-walled office, Nathaniel Reed, the 38-year-old CEO of Silver Rock, was finishing a board meeting. Cold, calculated, and always paired with thick black coffee and billion-dollar deals, he was a man of numbers and strategy. The kind of man Emily never imagined would, in just a few months, completely shift the course of her life. Memories of her mother lived in Emily's mind like a slow-moving film, a woman with resilient eyes and calloused hands from 30 years at the local bakery. Linda Carter never spoke much about the past, but there was one phrase she repeated often. Never put your heart in the hands of a man with power and money. They take everything and leave scars that never heal. Emily grew up with that warning etched into her bones. Her father had abandoned her mother the moment he learned she was pregnant. A businessman from the city, in Montana briefly on a work trip, he disappeared without a word, leaving Linda alone with a child and a pile of unpaid bills. From a young age, Emily understood. Love could bring even the strongest woman to her knees. She watched her mother give up everything, college, a career, her youth, to work tirelessly for her daughter's future. That's why, when she entered the world of finance, where powerful men like Nathaniel Reed were icons of success, Emily made a quiet vow to herself. I came here to work, not to fall in love. But sometimes, the promises we make to ourselves are the first to be tested. Emily didn't take long to prove she was unlike anyone who had ever worked at Silver Rock Capitol. Within 3 weeks, she had reconstructed the entire customer forecasting model for the firm's southern market expansion. What took others months to identify, she uncovered in just a few sessions of data analysis and field interviews. She didn't just read numbers, she felt the rhythm beneath them, the invisible currents that data only partially captured. That's when Nathaniel Reed, a man usually fixated on end results, started noticing how she approached problems. At first, his interest was purely professional. A few late-night emails, concise and to the point. An unexpected invitation to join a high-level strategy session. Then, a post-meeting conversation that stretched into the evening, diving deeper into a confusing data trend that had stumped the entire analytics team. Nathaniel found something rare in Emily, a way of seeing the world that was both methodical and deeply intuitive. Something he hadn't seen in anyone else at the firm. Emily, of course, noticed the shift, but she maintained her boundaries with precision. Everything stayed strictly professional, no lingering looks, no casual texts after hours, unless it was about work, no signs of weakness, no cracks. But those boundaries began to blur. One Friday evening around 9 p.m., they were the last two people in the office. Emily was fine-tuning a report comparing consumer behavior in Georgia versus North Carolina when Nathaniel walked in. Sleeves rolled, tie loosened, holding 2 coffees. No one should be working on data this intense on an empty stomach, he said, setting a cup on her desk. They sat across from each other in the hushed stillness of a mostly darkened office. The conversation started with numbers, shifted into regional culture, and then, unexpectedly, veered into childhood. Emily spoke of Montana winters, when her mother used the bakery oven to heat their small home because the gas had been shut off. Nathaniel, after a long pause, shared about quiet dinners with parents who valued grades more than words. "I think I learned how to survive through scarcity," Emily said softly. "And I," Nathaniel replied, even quieter, "learned from silence no one wanted to fill." In that moment, they weren't CEO and employee, they were two people, each carrying invisible bruises, sitting across from one another, silently acknowledging that empathy could run deeper than love. And it was that very silence that scared Emily the most. After that evening, something between Emily and Nathaniel shifted, even if no one said a word. She didn't avoid him. He didn't push for more. But every time their eyes met in a meeting, there was a pause, a quiet recognition. Not uncomfortable, but worth preserving. Work moved forward. Emily was assigned to lead the final report for the Southern Expansion Project. Nathaniel began inviting her to executive meetings regularly. She never asked why, he never explained, but she understood. It was trust, and that was somehow more terrifying than attraction. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, she received a dinner invitation, not from his assistant, but from Nathaniel himself. The message was short. "Friday, 7 p.m. Orem Restaurant. I'd like to thank you for everything you've done for the project." Emily stood in front of the mirror longer than usual that night. A simple navy dress, loose waves in her hair, nothing extravagant, but there was a softness in her reflection she hadn't seen before. The restaurant was on the rooftop of a boutique hotel in the heart of Boston. The table was reserved, adorned with white flowers, red wine, soft candlelight. Everything was elegant without being excessive, but clear enough for Emily to know this was not just a business dinner. After dessert, Nathaniel pulled a small velvet box from his inner jacket pocket. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't meant to impress, just a simple, elegant solitaire ring, the kind that reflected how he always carried himself. "I know the timing may not be perfect," he said, eyes steady on hers, "but I also know one thing for certain. I love you, Emily, and that's not something I can control anymore." Emily froze. Her heart pounded so loudly she couldn't breathe. Doubt tangled with hope inside her, the kind of hope she had spent her whole life guarding against. Part of her wanted to believe this was the moment, that every doubt she'd ever carried had finally dissolved. But then her mother's voice echoed in her mind, a warning wrapped in love, cold but protective. She gently placed her hand over the box and pushed it back toward him. "Nathaniel, you're a remarkable man, and I can't deny what I feel, but I can't, not now." She withdrew her hand, her eyes glassy, her voice calm. "My mother needs me. She's the reason I came here. I can't split my focus between caring for her and starting a life with you. I'm not strong enough." A long silence followed. Nathaniel didn't protest. He simply nodded, slowly, and offered a faint smile. Sad, but sincere. "That answer, it hurts. But you're honest, and I respect that." Just 3 weeks after her rejection, Emily got a phone call at 2 a.m. from an unknown Montana number. On the other end was her mother's neighbor, Mrs. Margie. Her voice trembled with worry. "Linda was just rushed to the hospital. The doctors say her heart's gotten worse. They need to operate. Urgently." Emily shot out of bed, her heart sinking. What followed was 3 straight days of silent chaos, calling hospitals, requesting cost estimates, researching emergency medical loans, even checking crowdfunding platforms. The surgery would cost $250,000, money Emily didn't have access to, not even with her job at one of Boston's top firms. She barely slept 2 hours a night, balancing work while sending desperate emails, making endless phone calls, trying to stay composed. No one knew. No one at the office noticed the storm beneath her composed gaze. Then, one afternoon, her phone rang again. It was the hospital in Montana. "Ms. Carter, an anonymous donor has covered the entire cost of your mother's surgery, 100%. We're ready to proceed tomorrow morning." Emily froze. Her phone shook in her hand. She didn't have to ask who it was. In her heart, only one name surfaced: Nathaniel. She had never told him the full details about her mother's condition, but maybe Layla, her closest colleague, had. Maybe he noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. Maybe he just needed a reason to act. And he left no name, no message, no clue that would make her feel indebted. Just a silent gift. No conditions, no need for acknowledgement. And in that silence, Emily finally heard the loudest truth. Emily sat down, hands clasped tightly. Her heart cracked open, pain, gratitude, and a love she could no longer push away. Emily flew back to Montana immediately after the surgery. For the next 2 weeks, she rarely left the hospital, feeding her mother, helping her sleep, watching every breath. The surgery had gone well, but recovery would take time. Despite the exhaustion, Emily felt a strange sense of peace. Each time she held her mother's hand, she silently thanked the one who had made this miracle possible, the man she'd never officially thanked. When the doctor finally said her mother was stable, Emily returned to Boston. But she didn't head to the office right away. There was something else she needed to do first, something she had thought about every day in Montana. She went straight to the Fairmont Hotel, where Silver Rock was hosting a regional summit. As she walked through the old, windy streets of Boston, the sky turned heavy with clouds, and the first winds of winter stirred. Entering the lobby, Emily wasn't sure what she'd say, only that this time, silence wouldn't be enough. And then, as if fate had choreographed the moment, she saw Nathaniel standing by the bar, holding an espresso, gazing out the tall windows. She walked over and stood in front of him. He turned. His eyes flickered with surprise, then softened. "I thought you were still in Montana," he said quietly. "I just got back," she replied hesitantly. "I needed to see you." They stood silently for a few seconds. Then Nathaniel gestured toward the elevator, offering quiet privacy. Inside the familiar suite, the warm golden light made everything feel close. Emily stood still for a moment, then exhaled deeply. "I know you're the one who paid for my mother's surgery." Nathaniel didn't deny it, nor did he seem surprised. "Why you didn't say anything?" she asked. "Because I didn't want you to feel indebted or pressured. I wanted you to have a choice, completely free." Emily stepped closer, meeting his gaze. "This time, I choose. And I choose you." He pulled her into his arms, whispering, "That's all I ever needed to hear." The words were simple, almost unremarkable, but to Emily, they were the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard. A quiet forgiveness, an unspoken acceptance, and most of all, a love that didn't need to win. It only needed to be received. They didn't make any promises in that room. No ultimatums, no rushed plans. But when Emily looked into Nathaniel's eyes, she knew. Everything from this moment on would be different. She was no longer walking alone. A week later, Nathaniel flew with Emily to Montana. He wanted to meet Linda not as the man who helped, but as a future son-in-law seeking permission to step into the world Emily had once tried to protect him from. The little wooden house where Emily grew up stood against the snowy landscape like something out of a painting. Inside, Linda looked thinner, but her eyes were bright and steady. When she opened the door and saw Nathaniel standing beside her daughter, she didn't speak for a moment. Then, she smiled. Not a surprised or giddy smile, but one that recognized something deeply important. During a humble dinner of roast chicken and butternut squash soup, no one mentioned hospitals, money, or work. Nathaniel shared clumsy childhood stories, Emily laughed, and Linda watched them quietly. After the meal, while Emily washed dishes, Linda sat by the window with a warm cup of tea and called Nathaniel over. "Do you know why I always warned her about men like you?" she asked. Not angrily, just honestly. Nathaniel nodded. "I think I do." Linda smiled again, this time softer. "But you're not like the man who left me and my daughter. You didn't give to get something back. You gave her a choice, something I never had." He sat still, then lowered his head slightly. "Thank you for trusting me." Linda didn't reply. She just patted his hand gently, a silent acceptance that needed no words. That night, as Emily rested her head on Nathaniel's shoulder, listening to the calm rhythm of his breath, she knew one thing for certain. True love doesn't begin with "do you need me," but with "are you free to choose me?" That morning, Montana's air was thin and clear like glass. Outside, snow blanketed the quiet country roads. Inside the small kitchen, the smell of toast and coffee floated gently. Emily had just helped her mother outside for a bit of sunshine. Nathaniel sat nearby, finishing edits on a report. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them was peaceful, the kind that comes only after two people have weathered every storm and still choose each other. He rose and walked into the living room. When Emily returned, she saw him seated in the same wooden chair she used to study in as a child. In his hands was a small wooden box. "I was going to wait," he said, looking up at her, voice soft as morning light. "But you deserve to hear this while you're still smiling." Emily looked at him, her eyes widening not in shock, but in recognition. "You once told me you needed time," he continued. "I gave it, but from that moment on, I've wished for only one thing, that when you say yes, it won't be because I waited, but because you truly want to." He opened the box. Inside was a simple sapphire ring, not too bright, but warm and deep like his gaze. No party, no audience, just the home you grew up in, where love finally found its meaning for both of us. He knelt, unscripted, without flourish. "Emily Carter, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes, not from surprise, but because her heart this time felt no fear. "Yes," she whispered, "because this time I choose you, not because you loved me, not because you waited, but because I want to walk beside you, freely." Nathaniel smiled, gently squeezing her hand, as if he could finally breathe after holding it in for so long. Outside, the sun peeked through thin clouds, just bright enough to begin a new chapter. And that, lovely soul, is how love found its way, not through grand gestures, but quiet choices and healing hearts. If this story touched something deep within you, don't forget to like, share, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever loved someone enough to let them go, or strong enough to choose them again? Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and remember, some of the greatest love stories begin with silence. See you in the next one.